go for launch.
5.
Quiet, numbskulls. I'm broadcasting. Anything can happen in the next half hour.
4.
My friend, we cannot keep this a secret any longer.
This whole thing is insane.
3.
Quiet, please. I am analyzing.
Where's the kaboom?
2.
There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
1.
What's that book you've been reading about?
It's about heroes who get to go on adventures, defeat the monsters, and save the day. Little boy from the south side of Chicago, the only tourist to get to do that. This story is about my father and the secret birthright that's been kept from us. You going after it. We're gonna need a car.
There's no strand there, Jay?
This is family business. And families stay together.
Scared for myself.
Just because they don't want you here doesn't mean you're not supposed to be.
Gotta get away.
This is an invitation to unmitigated power.
Where in the hell did I go wrong with you, boy? I told you to stay away from that damn place.
There's something here. Just trying to get out.
Everything is where and as it should be. From God to man to creature.
We're surrounded by monsters. I'm doing this to protect us.
You can't win this game. They setting up for you to play.
This legacy belongs to our family.
We gotta face this new world and stake our claim in it.
This is our family story.
Greetings, my fellow galactic travelers, and welcome back to Planet 8. This is your mission commander Larry speaking to you from our hidden base. Chief Engineer Bob is here by my side as always in the command center, and circling Planet 8 in our orbital spy satellite is Reconnaissance Officer Karen.
And on this episode of Planet 8, we have our very special friend and special guest of Planet 8, Lord Blood-Rah himself in the flesh, joining us today as we discuss Lovecraft Country, the HBO Max TV series that had such elements of intrigue and horror. Some of us almost didn't get through the entire series straight away. Let's kick that to the satellite, Karen. No, just kidding. Lord Blood-Rah, it is fantastic to have you on the show again. Thank you for being here today.
My lords and ladies, it's always an honor to be here on Planet 8. I see the vinyl forest is in full bloom. It's wonderful. All the kaiju monsters are coming up quite nicely, and it's always just a thrill to be here. Thank you for having me.
Welcome back.
Well, thank you. So let me ask you guys now. We were talking a little before the show. Karen had some problems with the certain episodes of the show with the gore and the blood. And let me tell you, listeners, we are going to spoil the heck out of this series. So we're going to be diving deep. We're going to be going into details. We're going to go into character arcs. We're going to talk about the finale, the season finale. So if you have not watched all the episodes of Lovecraft Country, fair warning, this is it. We're going to go in. So Let me ask you, Karen, because I think out of all of us, you're the one. Did you read the book or you have the book?
I read the book last summer.
Okay.
You know, it was one of those books that was on my radar for a while. It had been highly touted, highly reviewed. And so it was something I was meaning to read. You know, it looked interesting. Of course, I had read Lovecraft stories, you know, as a kid growing up and in my early 20s and stuff. I haven't really revisited it in a while, any of the H.P. Lovecraft works, but it was intriguing. So then when I heard, they're going to make an HBO series, I thought, well, I kind of want to read this before I see the series. Of course, that's always a little dangerous because you never know if you read the book, then you may be let down by the show. But I went ahead and read it. Yeah, it's an interesting book. I would recommend it to anybody. The guy, what was also intriguing about it is the author, Matt Ruff, actually wrote it with the intention of trying to sell it to TV. So it reads like a series of vignettes. You know, they're all interconnected, but it's not one long story. It's several small stories with the same characters throughout. So in that sense, it's very much like the TV series, but the show diverges quite a bit from the book. In not only some of the characters, but also the overall arc of the TV series is quite different from the book once you get past probably the first initial episodes. But I don't want to ruin the book for anybody.
Right.
If anybody wants to go and read it, I would still say it's a worthwhile experience.
Well, Lord Blood-Rah, let me ask you, your first experience with H.P. Lovecraft, was it a book, a short story? How did you come across before, obviously, the series?
Oh, well, before even realizing that it was H.P. Lovecraft, it had to be one of the movies. It had to be either the Dunwich Horror, the 1970s version of that, or the Haunted Palace, which was supposedly in the Poe line of Vincent Price, Roger Corman films, but was actually based on a Lovecraft story, The Strange Case of, I've forgotten, the Strange Case of someone.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it was a Lovecraft story. But then when I realized, these are Lovecraft stories, I read Call of Cthulhu. And just immediately got hooked and have tried to read as much Lovecraft as I can. Amazing author who, oddly enough, has become controversial this many years later because of his racism and xenophobia. So I found it interesting that this show, with a primarily black cast, called itself Lovecraft Country. I like that kind of twist. Lovecraft has become, like I say, controversial for his racism, and some people have even said, have refused to read Lovecraft, and kind of gives him a stigma. I don't think H.P. Lovecraft could have written the stories that he wrote and taken the tack that he did with his horror if he wasn't a raging xenophobe. Because it's all about what his horror is. The outside, the for him, non-me. Anything outside of Providence, Rhode Island to him was evil. So, but the non-me coming to get me, coming to change society, to destroy society, to infect my blood even. And a lot of the episodes, a lot of the stories that H.P. Lovecraft wrote ends up with the outsider actually infecting the physical body. His xenophobia was at the heart of Lovecraft, of H.P. Lovecraft's literature, and to call this the book and then the series Lovecraft Country, I found that as kind of a spin on that entire thing. That it takes that racism and xenophobia and totally turns it on its head in this series.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It did turn it on its head. Let's check in with our chief engineer, Bob. Your earliest recollection of H.P. Lovecraft?
I was never really a Lovecraft fan or reader or whatever. So, hey, I guess it's this series. But, I'd heard of Lovecraft and Cthulhu and the whole thing. In fact, I did pick up a book from Barnes & Noble that had a bunch of the Lovecraft stories all collected in a book. So I will be reading it at some point. I was very impressed by the series. I'll definitely say that.
I'll tell you just real quick, after reading like a lot of Lovecraft, Godzilla, King of the Monsters is in a lot of ways a Lovecraftian story.
So trying to appeal to me that way, huh?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Use that as your in to H.P. Lovecraft. There's a lot of Lovecraftian lore going on in there.
All right. Yeah. Well, I will definitely check it out. I was very impressed by the series, and just the fact not only that it was a good series, but the fact that they were willing to tackle some of the themes and some of the concepts that they did. They could have just set it in modern times and had it a horror story, but taking it back to the 50s, and they even, I think, go back to like 1921 at one point, that was pretty daring. And I don't think a lot of people want to even acknowledge that era or what happened during that era, let alone base a series on it. But I will say, I got to say, I think real first impressions are like, Atticus had some really cool shirts. He got to wear all the cool shirts.
The wardrobe is really striking. I have to say the overall design of the show, the wardrobe, everybody looks really cool. They look really neat. I mean, it's you can tell there's a lot of strong design elements in the show.
Yeah, I mean that and like was it Journey Smollett who plays Letitia? Man, she can run like a gazelle. And she does in like, 2 or 3 episodes? When she starts running, it's like, holy crap, look at that.
Yeah.
Well, she must have some kind of sporting background in her or something, but.
Yeah, I'm like Bob. I didn't really get into Lovecraft as I was growing up. It was later in life. God, what was that movie? Will played it at Thrillville. It was
Reanimator?
Reanimator.
Oh, yes.
God almighty. That was... that's quite a film.
Yes.
But after watching the series, I was aware of Lovecraft and his history and some of the controversy. Bold moves going into this story and tackling... the racism, the dark underbelly of our past as a nation. And, the entire cast, or predominantly, was African-American actors. You had a couple of white people here and there with the cult, and the Korean story was even that was an interesting story.
I loved that episode.
Yeah, that was.
It was so magical.
That was almost like a 180-degree turn right in the middle of the series, and you're wondering what the heck is going on now. And then they bring it all back into the main story, but
it brought a lot of needed depth to Atticus too.
Yes.
I think because you understood what happened to him in the Korean War and the things he had to do that had really damaged him as a person.
Right, and it's one thing to be on the receiving end. It's another thing to be the one dealing the racism or the punishment or doing the act that is abhorrent or, questionable.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing about Atticus, though, is, he's in that era. He's used to being discriminated against. But then when he finds out his father is gay, he's like, suddenly complete turn. He's ready to do the same thing to him.
Well, exactly right. And that there were just so many layers to this story and to these characters. my one regret is that Uncle George buys it so early on in the series.
Oh, yeah.
I really liked Uncle George. This bold man who would drive, across country during this era of just abhorrently racist
lynchings and everything else.
Just risking to give safe passage, from one town to another.
Right. Well, he published the safe Negro travel guide.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. These are places you can go. These are places you can't go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we were talking before the show. It's like first episode, or maybe it's the second episode, where they're in the forest and it's at night, and, you got the white Southern sheriff, and it's like, do you run from the sheriff or do you run from the monsters that are falling from the trees? Like, what's the lesser of the two?
Right. Yeah, they're just as dangerous as the monsters. Yeah, and that to me is the thing that really sets this show apart, is that it lays the horror and the terror that blacks felt in Jim Crow 1950s. I mean, just existing in many parts of this country, over the horror of the monsters and the general sinister nature of the story that's going on. It's just the racism adds another level of horror that these characters have to deal with, which gives them really no safe harbor.
Right.
And it makes it makes the show feel almost claustrophobic, in that the only place most of these characters can run for safety is to be with other blacks, or be with the family, that's the only place, because they're not going to get it they're not going to seek justice from the police, safety from the police. They're not going to find safety or justice in white neighborhoods. They're not going to find it anywhere within this story during that time. And it just makes the horror of their situation that much more acute.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you usually feel safe at home, but even when they're at home, their home's getting shot up and torched and, lynched and whatever. I mean, there's literally nowhere to run.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And very much like, the way Rod Serling tackled social issues of the day, using speculative fiction and science fiction and horror and things like that. This entire series very much did that about the entire racial situation in the United States.
Yeah, I think Twilight Zone would do it metaphorically, whereas this does it head on. There's no metaphors here. It's like, this is what it was like.
Well, it does it both ways. It does it both ways. Like the scenes where Ruby uses magic to transform into a white woman.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's very metaphor. And her sense of release and her sense of realizing, wow, this is what it's like to walk down the street and not be looked down on, not to be looked at as less than, and to get a job that she was perfectly qualified to do as a black woman, but now she's got it because she's white. And it does both, really. It lays it bare on a level, but then also there are these metaphorical and often very gory and horrific set pieces that really encapsulate the feeling of the effects of racism.
Yeah, Lord Blood-Rah, some of those scenes were some of the best. But her shedding the skin after wow. It's like Cinderella slippers, you hit the. But what was interesting too is she found herself is that the more that she was in the skin of a white lady, she found herself kind of looking down on some of the African American people who, she would otherwise work with if it were not the case.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen the show, but I'm trying to remember. But yeah, that seems right. Yeah. Now, is that a comment on the natural effect of privilege, even the temporary privilege she felt while being a white?
So
possibly, yeah.
Yeah. And, the flip side of it is, she could walk down the street. The police wouldn't question why she's walking down the street.
Right.
She'd walk into, work, and there were no looks, no stares, no, I have a good many friends, coworkers and close personal friends, and they'll tell me, you just don't know, walking in, certain neighborhoods, or back in the 60s, this is how, it would be going to something as simple as dinner,
Yeah.
And it just, this series really told that story, I think. It, as well as all the gore and the monsters and stuff.
Right.
But to me, it was just when you watch something, in my opinion, it makes you feel uncomfortable. That's a good story, right? Because you're finding out stuff, or you're watching things that shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't should not have happened.
Right.
But it did.
Right.
And the other, not to go down too far in the series, but what was the name of the cult that they had, like the Adams?
The Son of Adam. Sons of Adam.
Right.
Yeah. At the Ardham Lodge. And that was like second or third episode where they're brought into this like cult, right? I mean, and the story is shared where he's of a bloodline, right? And things just continue to get freaky deaky and spiral out of control.
Right, exactly.
And then, like I said before, unfortunately, Uncle George didn't make it.
Right.
He passed away, and so then they have to bring Uncle George back home. And it was his aunt then that took on that role,
right,
of continuing what her husband was doing and driving cross country. What did you guys think? I mean, just overall, the whole thing with the cult, and what was the guy's name? His name was Titus Braithwaite.
Right.
That was that was a great name. Good actor too. I mean,
yeah.
What was the name of the character in Game of Thrones? That little prince. Sorry. that kid is, Tyrion is such a good actor because the world hated that character.
Oh no, you're talking about the prince.
The way you just hurt people. Anyway, enough about Game of Thrones. But Titus, and then his children. It was the daughter and the son, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, there was Christina, which is interesting. In the book, Christina is Caleb. There is no female. Huh. There's no daughter. They changed the gender from the book. Yeah.
But there's a big reveal at one point.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think with Christina, she was frustrated because she could not be heir to all this magical knowledge and power, and I think they were exploring some concepts in, gender differences, and especially, back in the 50s. 60s and so forth, women were also repressed in a lot of ways. Right. So that probably was a reason for that change.
Yeah, in a broader sense, it is really more about just the general intolerance. It is obviously the heavy emphasis on racism, but also sexism and also homophobia when it's revealed that Tick's father is gay. Like you say, he turns away from him, but there's an incredible scene where Montrose is the father's name, walks into a gay bar and he looks around and he sees these fellow gay men happy, laughing, dancing, and he starts to relax. You can see, and this character was up until now very stern, very hard, very an alcoholic, a very not a very likable guy. You can see all that kind of melt away, and he just kind of relaxes into this happiness.
Well, I think, back then, it's not as prevalent. He probably felt isolated.
Oh, oh, absolutely.
I'm gay, but I'm not that gay. I'm just like, I'm a regular guy that just happens to like guys. He doesn't, he can't let himself go until he goes in the bar and realizes there are other people like me that, I can share with. And then suddenly he definitely loosens up and everything changes at that point. But then it's after that Atticus finds out and pops the gasket.
Well,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, we also see, and I think it's the next to last episode, when they travel back in time, we see how his father treated him, how Montrose's father treated him. And he actually turns out to be almost a carbon copy of his father in that he's very abusive. Montrose's father is abusive towards him and denigrates him and everything else. And then Montrose turns around and, he treated Tick very badly all the time. And I think there was a lot of internalized homophobia for Montrose, obviously. And we hear that, especially for Black gay men, there's a lot of pressure on them, much more so than in the white gay community that, you're not supposed to be gay, that's wrong, and blah, blah, blah. So they brought all that forward in this. And this was another character who was not gay in the book. So I think, like you were saying, they wanted to show the racism, sexism, and homophobia for the time period.
Do you know when that book was written?
2016.
Oh, okay. So fairly recently. Okay.
It's fairly recent. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So it's interesting. They modified a lot of these characters to examine the wider question of general intolerance as well.
So in the book, is it mainly just racism that they're touching on?
Yeah, I would say primarily the focus is on the racism of the time. And it's not the monstrous and magical elements are not as overt. They're referred to, but you don't see, the reader doesn't see the monsters and things as overtly. That's why the first episode I was shocked when they had the Shoggoths or whatever they were burst out and start attacking them. It was like, oh, well, this is different. It was more left to the imagination.
Oh.
Well, did the author of the book, did he have anything to do with the series? Was he a writer or a producer or anything, or did they just take the book and run with it?
I don't know that he was all that involved with it, but I haven't looked at the credits to see. I know
I've got Internet Movie Database open. What was the author's name? The
author's name is Matt Ruff.
Matt Ruff. Go ahead and talk amongst yourselves, and I'll take a look and see if he's in here.
Just to double back quickly on something that we talked about with this show dealing with racism and the situations back in the 1950s during the Jim Crow era. I think a lot of people, well, I don't know a lot of people, but I would imagine that many people who watched the show didn't realize that the Tulsa riots, the Tulsa massacre that they talked about was real. That happened. A town was massacred. Emmett Till, the Emmett Till funeral that they touch on that happens in Chicago, that was real. That happened. And something a little bit more obscure in the episode where Letty buys the house to make it like a boarding house in this white community. The house is haunted by these essentially black ghosts, but they're the subjects of horrible experimentation, body parts sewn together and things like that. There is a case of a madam in New Orleans. I say a madam, not a madam in the prostitute sense. A woman in New Orleans who did that with her servant. She had basically a torture chamber quasi-medical facility set up in her basement and would do these wild, insane, ridiculous torturous experiments on them. As a matter of fact, that was touched on in one of the seasons of American Horror Story. I want to say
I was
Coven.
trying to remember, yeah.
I think Coven. Yeah, that character that I believe it was Bates, who Kathy Bates played that character in that season. The name that was a real character. I mean, she actually existed. She actually did those things.
Wow.
So one of the jaw-dropping moments of the series, especially in that episode, was the baseball player who's like 6'5" or so with the baby head. Do you remember that image?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That was yeah.
I think I literally like gasped when I saw that. Oh, God,
so I did look on Internet Movie Database.
Yes.
There are like 22 producers on this thing.
Oh.
And Matt Ruff was not any of them.
Oh.
There was like seven or 8 writers, but he was not one of them. It just says based on his novel is all it says.
He took the money and ran.
So I mean, basically,
good luck
they probably bought the story from him and then they did their own take.
Very good. I hope he was well compensated for it.
So speaking of disturbing images, because yes, the baseball player with the baby head was pretty disturbing. Oh. Because I know this show disturbed me a lot. Like I said, I had stopped halfway and then I came back and watched the rest. And I'm glad I did because it's actually a really interesting show. I just have a low tolerance for gore. What do you guys, like you were saying, Lord Blood-Rah, this is a very visceral show and it leaves you with a lot of images. What are some of the images that stand out for you guys?
Well, yeah, like I said, for me, it was the first time that Ruby sheds her skin to become a white woman and then transforms back. Just that scene. Well, there's one scene where she's having sex.
Yes.
And it happens in the middle of sex.
That was that was tough.
And that was that was one of those visual.
And they just kept going.
And they just kept going. Right, yeah.
Oh, I probably would not have sex the rest of my life after that.
But doesn't she later say, I wanted to have sex with you in my own body later, that I couldn't keep up this facade anymore. It had to be in my own body, or am I imagining? It's been a while since I've seen
something like that.
The episode. But that that was an incredible visual moment to me. And another one that is not gory at all, but is equally striking, was, again, Montrose, his kind of at least coming out to himself in that gay bar. There was no blood or flesh involved, but this him dancing by himself in this gay club and finally smiling. You never see that character smile up until that point. And it's one of the few times that you do. I think after that, you don't see it very much. But he kind of finally becomes comfortable in his own skin at that moment, and that was very visceral. And well, I get where we've announced a spoiler alert anyway. Yeah. The last moments where the little girl, and I'm forgetting her name, Diana, I think.
Yeah, they just call her D, but yeah.
Right. Over like the broken body of the daughter of the cult leader. I've forgotten her name.
Oh, Christina.
Over Christina's broken body, claims that we have now taken magic. That was a powerful moment. It was symbolic of we are not asking for, as black people, we are not asking for acceptance anymore. We are not asking for rights. We have now taken the magic. We have it now, accept it or not, but we now have that power. That's incredible finale for the episode. And we talked earlier about the image of the little girl on the cover of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Very stereotypical young black girl from the slave era, torn dress, wild, braided hair and that kind of thing. And of course, being a cartoon, the wide lips, and they come to life. These twins come to life and menace Diana a couple of episodes before that, chasing her and doing these wild gestures and this wild dance. It's a dance while they're menacing her. They're dancing closer and closer to her
as they pursue her in this wild kind of,
just wild demonic way. That was another very visually striking.
Well, yeah, because she's on the subway or train tracks or whatever, waiting for the train, and they show up, and of course no one else can see them.
Right.
And she has to like flee through the crowd and try to get away, and it's very, like a lot of Japanese horror. They have like the ghost or the demon will have weird jerky movements, and just the creep factor is there. Mm-hmm. This was like the same thing. It's like, you just watching them, it's like, man, how do they even do those movements, let alone, they're scary as hell. But it was, I thought they were very well done.
Well, they're listed here as malevolent spirits, Topsy and Bopsy. They gave them names, but they were malevolent spirits.
Okay.
What was
on top of everything else? They have to give them clown names too.
Double whammy. The interesting thing to me about that segment, which was really terrifying, is it took one of the most interesting parts in the book and changed it around quite a bit, but still was really super effective. In the book, there was a little doll chasing the character, which, would have been creepy, I think, but maybe kind of hard to do effectively on screen. I mean, you would have had to CGI it probably to do it, and that would have been expensive.
Karen, was it a Zuni fetish?
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the choice they made actually is even more effective because it was about her maybe becoming these things too. Right. And, a very sort of degraded version of herself.
Right.
So again, it was sort of that horror, not only of this thing that's after you, but this thing transforming you. Mm-hmm. So again, not an interesting and really good choice on the part of the film, the showmakers.
Well, another thing too is like,
demons. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
You have images of them just standing on the street like a couple normal kids until they turn around and you see the face, and then they start doing the movements.
Right.
So there was a couple scenes like that where, Dee's walking down the street, she sees a couple kids, and it's suddenly them, and the terror starts again.
Yeah, I mean, these victimizing a young, modern, as of the time period of the story, black girl with these images of racist representations of young black girls of the past, and turning those into the monster that's coming after her to possess her. Brilliant stroke. I mean, and you talk about metaphorical attack. Fantastic.
Well, I mean, they even come off the cover of Uncle Tom's Cabin, the book,
right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we kind of talked a little bit before recording about it, but I think that's maybe one of the differences between the book and the show. The book, and again, nothing against the author, but a white author is going to have a very different perspective on these things than the black showrunners. And it shows out in the choices that were made for the show.
Indeed. I think another moment where I kind of felt uncomfortable was when, Letty has the house and then all the cops show up, and it's like had again those forest monsters, I forget what the demons are called, not showed up, who knows what the police would have done. And it's that thing, who is the monster? They kind of do that with Walking Dead too. It's like, are we afraid of the zombies or are we afraid of Negan? Who's scarier, humans or monsters?
Right.
And they carry this through Lovecraft Country from beginning to end.
Well, I think if you look at like the walkers, or you look at the monsters, they're pretty straightforward. You know what they're going to do. They're going to chase you down. They're going to try to eat you. Humans, you have no idea. They're batshit crazy. So you have no idea what they're going to do. They can come at you at any.
Yeah, the monsters are just going to eat you. So you know that danger.
I mean, you see somebody on the street, and hey, they may treat you with respect, or they may hate you. You don't know until you encounter them. Right. It's not like, oh, there's a monster, I'm going to run.
Right. Yes.
You know, that's interesting. And not to jump around to too many different series. There was this Korean show we watched on Netflix, Jasmine and I, and it's about monsters. It's not Home Alone.
Home Alone. Home Alone, yes. That was monsters everywhere.
It had Trump in it.
No, it's Home. Anyway, some of the monsters are bad monsters, and some of the monsters are helpful. I won't say good, but helpful monsters. But the humans are just terrible. I mean, you know, you can't trust them. And it was just an interesting thing. This one monster was cradling this child and like protecting it. And the people like freak out. Oh my God, it's a monster. And they burn it and kill it. And the kid's crying, you know, and I'm like, oh my God. What was the, right. Cause so when they have the shootout in the house in Lovecraft Country and that beast comes up from under the ground and it has like, you know, 20 eyes. And I'm like, it's going to eat him. But instead it goes after the cops, you know, and you're like, whew.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to answer your question, if the monsters didn't come, they would have just kept shooting up the house until everyone was dead. I mean, they were out to kill.
Burned it down. Yeah.
Well, I will say. Oh, go ahead, Walker.
Oh, I was just going to say, what did you guys think of the episode where Hippolyta discovers I don't know, it's like a multiverse machine or whatever.
The gate.
Yeah, and she goes off, and at one point she's. Oh gosh, who does she? The famous dancer. I forget who she.
Yeah, the French.
Yeah, I should have done my research. But she goes off and lives that life. She goes off and she's a warrior, and then she's like in a science fiction kind of realm, and she has all these lives. I thought that was pretty remarkable, pretty interesting. And then of course she comes back with all this knowledge and awareness.
Right. Well, right. In her life on Earth in that present time, she would not have had the opportunity to have been exposed to all that insight, all that experience, all that knowledge.
Right.
And you see when she came back, she is this enlightened, strong woman who, you know, picks up the reins and drives things forward. I thought that was brilliant. I really loved that segment.
Well, she kind of started off. She just wanted to dance on stage in Paris. That's what she wanted.
Yes.
And then that led to everything else and on and yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When she's kind of sick of that, achieving that's like, oh, there's more. And then that's when her imagination takes off and takes her to these worlds and these lives.
Well, it's going to make you happy. I want to dance the can-can in France. I've always wanted to be, God, and her name is so close. It's not Olivia, but anyway, I want to go dance with so-and-so. And then you do that for a number of years, and you know what? It didn't really make me happy. Right. Okay, let's go do this. Oh, now that was kind of fulfilling. I kind of lived like a Conan kind of existence out in the plains of Africa, and you know, that was very, very good.
Oh yeah.
Another segment I really, really enjoyed was going back to South Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, the whole thing with the nurse who's a spy, and you know, it's a communist spy, and he ends up killing her. And you know, he was following orders, yet he falls in love with her best friend, who happens to be a monster. But
yeah, well, I mean, that was very like Japanese ghost story-ish too.
Oh yeah.
You know, with all the tales that were coming out of her and all that. And yeah, I mean, it seemed like a kind of a throwaway episode just to show his background until she shows up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to be a big part of the last few episodes.
Right.
I think it was important in kind of helping us understand a little more about Atticus and where he came from. Because although he was our main character, there was a lot to him that felt sort of, I don't know, blank. There were blank spaces that I wanted to know more about, you know. So understanding that he had been in war, everybody was like, oh, you're a hero, you're a war hero. Well, the war hero, you know, did some really unpleasant things.
Right.
You know? So understanding that he had gone over there and he had done a lot of really nasty things, and he knew it and he felt it inside and he was suffering for it.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That was, you know, important to understand about his character.
Right. Yeah. That gave him a really interesting backstory, and you can understand a lot more about the character, a lot more about the man after that episode.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of the series, I mean, he comes back from the army.
Yeah.
And, you know, supposedly, I guess, on leave. But then he doesn't want to go back. And you don't really know why he didn't want to go back until, you know, that episode came up and you saw what actually happened to him back in Korea.
Right.
Well, he fell in love with the nine-tailed fox, that spirit that possessed her. Well, they fell in love with each other. And, you know, they get into this argument, and she has the intent that, well, I'm going to let the foxtails do their thing and kill him. But they don't. And instead, she has a premonition or a vision that if he goes back home, he will die.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she shares that with him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting then that he is pursuing this whole cult thing and trying to figure out, you know, what's going on. Does he not believe the premonition? Does I don't? You know, we keep on watching.
Well, I think he does, because he seems like he's very willing to sacrifice himself to save everyone, because he probably figures, oh, I'm going to die anyway, so I might as well, you know, sacrifice myself here.
Right. Yeah. I agree with that. I think he knows from that point on that his life is forfeit, but he's gonna try to, you know, help everybody around him and make sure they're safe and they're okay, and by sacrificing himself. Yeah.
And do you think he's trying to atone for the execution that he committed in South Korea?
That can very well be part of it.
That's part of his.
I think that's part of it. That he had to do a lot of things, probably, that he feels guilty over.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
You know what I thought was also really cool is that just as we have this Braithwaite family and they have their magical lineage and all this other stuff, we really see towards the end of the series too, you know, Atticus and Letty, especially going back in time, you know, they have their ancestors who are helping them succeed in their efforts against the Braithwaites. You know, and they're in sort of this realm. I'm not sure. I don't think it's really the past, but they're in this other place, especially when they're trying to save Diana. Mm-hmm. And we see, you know, I think the great grandmother and then Atticus's mother, and they're helping them with incantations and things like that. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of cool to see, like, it's almost like these dueling families, you know, these two sides. And that was really neat to see. Okay, they've got a lineage too. They were unaware of this lineage, but now they're discovering it. And I think that kind of parallels a lot of the Black experience too, that, you know, people were ripped away from their homes and they were forcibly brought to America. They didn't know who they were. And then discovering roots and things like that. There's a kind of a parallel there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, there's also when they go back to 1921 and everything kind of ties together, because when Montrose and his friend, well, I guess it was George.
It was George, yeah.
Yeah, they get attacked, and through the whole series, they're telling the story about, when we were kids, and, you know, this guy came and saved us, and he was swinging the bat like Jackie Robinson. And so they're Atticus and Montrose are like standing in the alleyway waiting for this guy to show up, and then Atticus realizes there's the bat at his feet. He was him, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the guy that they were telling the story.
Paradox.
Yeah.
It's, what was it, Obama? We're the ones we've been waiting for. So.
Yes, absolutely right.
There you go. Sometimes you got to step in, but yeah, the paradox, right?
Well, you think you're going back in time and this is your new idea and you're going to change things, and you find out that no, I was meant to go back in time and meant to be here at this point and do these things. So it's almost like, you know, it's almost kind of makes you question the whole time travel thing. Like if I go back in time and I change something and I come back, everything's going to be different. But it's already happened. So if you had gone back in time, you already did that. And the change has already happened. So you're not affecting anything. You're just perpetuating the circle or whatever.
Right. Well, now, according to Star Trek, you go back and change something, it just launches a new timeline. You're just launching timelines left and right.
Well, that's like the MCU also,
Hulk.
right?
Yes.
So,
What do you mean? Star Trek was wrong? Back to the Future was wrong? What?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, take your pick on time travel theories. Yeah.
well, that's what always cracks me up when people like say, you know, oh, they did time travel wrong in this movie. It's like, well, have you ever time traveled? Have you ever done that before?
How do you know?
How do you know? Yeah, how do you know it's going to affect anything or change anything or what the laws of time travel are unless you've done it? You know.
Right.
Well, my close personal friend Hiro Nakamura told me so.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I chose option A for time travel so that I will not affect this timeline. If I had chosen option B, we would all be working for apes. So
yeah, right. Exactly.
That may still happen, though.
The way things are going.
The way things are going, yeah. Yeah, hey, this virus is mutating.
Just saying.
Yeah, if a chimp gets it and starts doing math, we're all in trouble.
Well, I mean, the virus may be the end of man, and then who takes over?
Yeah, exactly.
The cockroach is ruling.
I was going to say the cockroach. Yeah,
they'll always be here. That's for sure.
Always. Yes.
Indeed.
What are they going to do? I guess there's going to be a season 2.
That is what I hear.
Oh.
So I was going to ask you, Karen, is there anything in the book that would lend itself to a season 2, or did they blow?
They pretty much blew everything up in the show, and I don't know. They're very different endings for the book and the show. I can't imagine anything that was left in the book to explore.
Well,
so
they could do like an X-Files show with Atticus and Letitia.
That would be cool.
It's like I don't know who's left to be the. Well, I guess
Diane, D.
Right, D.
Yeah,
D. Hippolyta, right?
They can go forward and backward in time. I don't know who the enemy is now. I mean, there's plenty of non-magical enemies still, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's no magical enemy because they've taken magic away from the white supremacists. So
unless there's some form of time travel involved that they undo, but that would be such a cheat. I'd hate if they did that.
Well, this was set in the 50s, so maybe they're just going to go on into the civil rights era of the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
That's true.
Time jump.
Yeah. Well, D's got to grow up, right? So.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting how they explain her robot arm. Maybe
I totally forgot about that. That's right.
Bionic arm.
They can hide that or something.
She has been to the future.
Just long sleeves and a glove.
Yeah,
Luke
pretty
does
much.
it.
Yeah, I was in a fire.
Yeah.
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 Well, any last minute thoughts or comments on Lovecraft Country, my friends?
I'm surprised they're doing a season 2. Quite frankly, I hadn't heard until you just saying it that they're doing a season 2. I hope it's as good as this.
I hope
they
so
can.
Too.
I hope it's just as imaginatively shot and imaginatively written. And one thought I had after watching this series, semi-unrelated. Jordan Peele, of course, was one of the producers, one of the apparently many producers on this show. One of my fantasy projects is for him to produce and direct, it would be wonderful, a remake of Blackula. Just could you imagine what he could do with the story of Mama Walde from Blackula?
All right.
But who do you cast as Blackula?
I was going to say, not to put you on the spot, Lord.
Idris Elba.
Oh, there you go.
Idris Elba.
Whoa.
Idris Elba. Anytime I can come up with casting, I would cast him as Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four. I'd cast him in Blackula. I'm totally in love with.
See your new man crush, Larry?
He is Denzel. Not new. I've always loved Denzel. He is an actor's actor. He and Tom Hanks are my two favorite actors. I would throw Denzel in there.
I mean, I would cast Idris Elba. Our luck, it would be Will Smith.
Well, see, you could have Denzel as Blackula and then have Tom Hanks as like a Van Helsing type character. And then Larry would be in heaven.
Yeah, I would. I'd be in hog heaven.
Just set the man down with a big tub of popcorn, and he'd be the happiest man alive.
I'll tell you the truth. I kind of envision it as a revenge tale against Dracula, because Dracula cursed him.
Right.
Yeah.
So I pictured it as a revenge tale. Anyway, I'm going to go away and write the screenplay.
I may have to go watch that tonight. I've got the midnight movie disc of Blackula and Scream, Blackula Scream. So
I
may have to have a double feature pretty soon.
It's been playing almost nonstop on Showbiz. Is it on Showbiz Voices, which has a lot of black films on it and 60s exploitation films and stuff. It's been playing almost nonstop on there, which is what kind of gave me the idea. It's like, I haven't seen this in a while.
Well, if you go to Airy TV, they actually have a blaxploitation channel, and they show all those kind of movies.
Yeah, I took a quick look at Airy, but it looks fantastic. I haven't watched it.
I had played it. We watched it over the Christmas. No, it was Thanksgiving. Jasmine had never seen it, and I love when films still work from the 50s, 60s, 70s, whether it's Vincent Price or Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. We watched that recently, and she got it, and she was like, loved that. It's like, is there another? I'm like, yeah, there is. There's a sequel. Oh, okay. Is there another? No, they didn't do another one after that.
Just two of them.
Well, Lord Blood-Rah might get his wish, and we'll have a reenactment or
Well, if you need to borrow Scream, Blackula Scream, let me know.
Yeah. Mama Walde, Cursed of Dracula, or something like that.
There you go.
Where Dracula gets his comeuppance.
But
but then I always think of the ultimate computer. You're great, I am great.
Oh, yeah.
The M5.
Yes.
He's towering over William Shatner. He looks like he's 2 feet taller than Shatner.
That's right.
I think he was.
And, of course, the king of cartoons.
Yeah.
King of cartoons. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Well, it is that point in our podcast. Don't get me wrong. We could go all day with you, Lord Blood-Rah. But it is our time in our podcast for our censor sweep. As Lord Blood-Rah is here, we're going to listen in and see what all Lord Blood-Rah has coming up for us. Lord Blood-Rah, take it away.
Well, of course, with all the ongoing craziness, there are no live shows in the foreseeable future. Hopefully that will change soon. We've got Creatures Con planned for Sunday, August 8th at the Crown Plaza in Concord. And this is a celebration of 90 years of the Universal Monsters. This is the 90th anniversary of the release of Dracula and Frankenstein, which kicked off the entire Universal cycle. Yeah. David J. Scal, who did a lot of the audio commentary for the the VHS and DVD releases of the
yes.
classics is going to be our special guest.
Oh, that's
there
great.
at the convention. Assuming it happens, I'm feeling very confident about it.
Yeah.
We're talking about August, but there are a lot of twists and turns, so who knows? I'm hoping that's going to be happening. Season 11 goes into production very shortly. The best thing to do is go to lordblood-rah.com to check out where you can see the show. There are various TV stations and streaming opportunities to check that out. And very soon, I'm going to be coming to Patreon with another weekly show that you will be able to get only through Patreon. And I'm going to be making that announcement hopefully fairly soon, but it'll be an exclusive Patreon TV show, a weekly TV show coming to Patreon. So be on the lookout for that.
That is awesome.
Exciting.
All right.
And
Well, we got a lot of good things to look forward to.
Why don't we tease the next episode of Planet 8 while we're at it?
Well, Chief, since you want us to go ahead, and we're going to be talking about Star Trek Discovery, and guess who's going to join us again? Lord Blood-Rah, you didn't realize this, but you're about to get kidnapped, and you're going to stay on Planet 8 for another episode.
Hey, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I'll talk mostly any science fiction, horror, anything like that, especially Star Trek, especially the newer incarnations of Star Trek. Sounds great. I'm into it.
Right. Well,
Lord Blood-Rah is like the fifth Beatle of Planet 8.
True.
Thanks,
Very true. Very true. Well, look, some people call Discovery newer Star Trek. Some people call it Star Trek Light. You'll have to tune into next episode, kids, to see which one of us think what.
Oh boy, just setting it up, aren't you? Can't help yourself, Larry.
Put it on the tee.
There's controversy with the new Star Trek. Definitely. Yeah.
There is indeed. You'll also find out who my other man crush is next episode.
Planet 8 Tiger Beat coming up next.
That's right.
We all know it's Sir. Come on, Larry.
On that note, you guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for following us. Be sure to check out Lord Blood-Rah online. I'm looking forward to that Patreon announcement. So do yourself a favor, follow Lord Blood-Rah, Twitter, Facebook, webpage. Please continue to follow us, planet8podcast.com, and over on our YouTube channel. As soon as we get our subscription up to, I think it's 100, we're going to be able to do a lot more with our YouTube channel. But thank you guys for following us. Stay safe.
On that note, this will conclude this transmission from Planet 8. We would like to thank all of our intergalactic audience for listening. Be sure to head on over to our website at www.planet8podcast.blogspot.com, where you can get more information on this episode's topic.
For more conversation, find us on Twitter at Planet 8Cast.
Or on Facebook at facebook.com/Planet8Podcast.
We want to thank you guys for tuning in each and every episode. We look forward to your input and opinions. Until next time, this is Planet 8 signing off. End transmission.
By George, he's got it. It is the end.
Stop that knocking, you had better stop that knocking at the door.